My name is Ranger Colton Haverly, and I serve with the National Park Service in the southern stretch of the Appalachians. I'm writing this account formally, as required by protocol, though I know what happened today will never fit neatly inside an incident report. I have served 10 years on these ridgelines, tracking missing hikers, repairing washed-out trails, checking camps, filing wildlife observations, and in that time I thought I had earned a stable understanding of what normal looks like in these mountains. Today proved me wrong. What unfolded across a single shift was unlike anything I have ever encountered in this job. A chain of events that started innocently, escalated quietly, and ended with a kind of dread that I'm still trying to put into words. I will record the facts exactly as they happened, with no embellishments, and I recognize that even without exaggeration, what I witnessed will be difficult to believe. My shift began at 6:10, about 20 minutes after dawn. Fog clung to the valley like damp wool, softening every edge of the world. The trailhead parking lot was empty except for a single sedan with out-of-state plates. The owner had signed the ledger for an overnight permit, but hadn't returned by midnight. Overdue hikers aren't unusual, especially in thick fog, so I noted the vehicle and radioed dispatch. They logged it as a routine check. Nothing about that moment felt strange yet. Just another morning where the mountains woke slower than I did. I started up Ridge Loop Trail, following the switchbacks as they climbed through stands of oak and rhododendron. The fog grew denser as I ascended. It had the uniform, silver-white quality that made judging distance tricky. Sound felt padded, too. My own footsteps seemed to disappear into the ground instead of echoing off the trees. I paused twice to listen, just out of habit. Normally mornings carried birdsong or at least the rustle of squirrels. Instead, the forest held a hush so complete it unsettled me in a way I couldn't articulate. I shrugged it off and continued my ascent. About a mile in, I reached a clearing where the fog thinned a little. That's when I spotted the first sign of trouble. A single hiking boot sitting upright beside the trail. Not tossed, not half-buried, not chewed by wildlife. Just placed, upright, as if its owner took it off with deliberate care and left it exactly there. The boot was dry inside despite the damp air. No footprints led to or away from it, which made no sense in the soft earth. I crouched, examined the ground again, and ran a hand over the laces. They were unlaced all the way down. That detail stuck with me. Most hikers loosen boots, not completely unlace them mid-trail. I took photos and radioed dispatch. While waiting for the response, I scanned the clearing more thoroughly. That's when I noticed something that should have immediately raised red flags but somehow only added to a strange quiet confusion. There was a second boot about 15 yards away, also upright, toes pointed neatly toward the base of a birch tree. No socks, no gear, no tracks. Dispatch came through a moment later asking if I'd found any evidence of injury or wildlife activity. I hadn't. They told me to continue searching for the missing hiker and update them every 15 minutes. That was standard. I continued along the trail, but the air had changed. It felt heavier. The fog shifted from simply obscuring the woods to pressing inward, brushing against me like a slow current. Even breathing felt different, like the humidity thickened just enough to notice. 50 minutes passed before I found the next clue. A torn page from a pocket notebook, pinned under a rock at a fork in the trail. The handwriting was shaky. If anyone finds this, I can't tell if something is following me or if I'm imagining it. I keep hearing someone walking behind me, but when I turn around, nothing. Going uphill, trying to reach the fire road. The signature was smeared by moisture, but the first letter looked like an M. I checked my GPS and realized the fork wasn't on any official map. The trail to the right was narrow, barely used. The trail to the left was wider, though still obscured by fog. My first instinct was to take the marked path, but something tugged at me. Maybe intuition, maybe the way the fog subtly curled along the narrower trail as if stirred by something moving ahead. I stepped onto the unmarked path. Within yards, the forest changed in a way that made the hair rise on my arms. The fog thickened again, swallowing color from the world. Even my uniform looked gray. The temperature dipped, just a few degrees, but the shift was sharp and sudden. I paused, listening again. This time, I heard something faint, a sound barely louder than breath. Footsteps, slow, measured. Behind me, I turned. Nothing but fog. Nothing but trees fading into white. I radioed dispatch, but before I could speak, the radio crackled with static so loud it made me flinch. I stepped back, and that was when I noticed it. A fresh footprint beside mine. Barefoot, small, pressed deep into the damp soil, and pointing in the direction I had come from, as if someone had been standing right behind me, watching, then walking away. I swallowed hard, forced a slow breath, and clicked the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Haverly," I said quietly. "I think I've got a situation." The radio hissed, then cleared. "We read you. Continue your search. Proceed with caution." Their voice sounded normal, calm, but suddenly the forest didn't feel calm at all. Not anymore, and as I followed the narrow trail deeper into the fog, I felt something shift, subtle but unmistakable, like the mountains themselves were paying attention, like I had stepped into the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. I moved carefully along the narrow trail, forcing my breathing to stay even as the fog thickened around me again. The bare footprint behind mine kept replaying in my head, sharp edges, fresh, unmistakably recent. It wasn't large enough to belong to a grown man, but too defined to belong to a child running barefoot through the woods. It looked intentional, placed, as if someone had stepped there slowly, deliberately, and then vanished back into the white curtain behind me. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my instincts, seasoned ones, kept whispering that something wasn't adding up. The trail narrowed further, hedged by rhododendron so dense it created a tunnel. The branches brushed my shoulders as I walked, scraping softly against my pack. The quiet deepened until it felt tactile, like pressure on my eardrums. Even my own footsteps seemed absorbed into the soil. I lifted my radio again just to test it, pressing lightly on the transmit button. A hiss of static answered me, softer this time but still wrong. A kind of wet crackle, like the sound of branches snapping under damp weight. I waited, hoping dispatch would break through, but the line stayed clogged with the low, intermittent popping. I clipped the radio back to my chest strap and continued. 10 more minutes passed before I reached a bend in the trail where the fog thinned enough to see several yards ahead. That's where I found the next clue. A hiking pole leaned against a tree, perfectly upright, its tip planted firmly in the ground. The rubber grip was dry, untouched by dew, and when I placed my hand around it, the metal shaft felt faintly warm, recently held. I scanned the ground. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing disturbed except the faint indentation where the pole rested. A few feet beyond it, another torn piece of notebook paper lay pinned under a twig. The handwriting was more hurried this time, cramped and slanted. I thought I heard someone say my name, not a shout. Closer. Too close. The fog is messing with my depth perception. I keep seeing shapes where there shouldn't be any. If anyone finds this, please head back. Don't follow me. Something isn't right on this ridge. Still signed with the same smeared initial. I tucked the page carefully into my pocket and radioed dispatch again. This time the static cleared enough for my voice to cut through. "Possible disoriented hiker leaving notes," I said. "Appears panicked. Signs suggest he's close. I'm continuing up the trail." Dispatch acknowledged, their tone calm. I didn't mention the footprint. Not yet. I can't explain why. I guess some part of me didn't want it written into the official record until I understood it myself. As I continued deeper, the fog shifted again. Less a blanket now and more a slow-moving tide. It pooled thicker in low spots and drifted in thin ribbons across the path. Occasionally, I thought I glimpsed movement in my peripheral vision, a shape sliding parallel to me in the trees, just beyond clarity. When I turned, it dissolved instantly, as if it had never been there. That's a classic effect in heavy fog, I reminded myself. Peripheral distortion. Nothing supernatural about it. Still, the repetition made the hair on my neck lift every time. After another stretch of steady climbing, the trail opened into a small plateau. I paused to check my GPS. The device flickered once, then steadied. According to the map, I was still on parkland, but much farther from marked trails than expected. Somehow the narrow path had veered more sharply uphill than I realized. I logged my coordinates and looked around. The plateau held something unusual. A circle of stones arranged in a loose ring. Not a fire ring. These rocks were too widely spaced, and none bore burn marks. Instead, it looked like someone had marked a boundary. Inside the ring, the soil was undisturbed, smooth except for a single object lying dead center. A sock, just one, rolled down loosely at the top, dirt smudged around the heel. I scanned the trees, listening. The fog pressed inward again, not quite silent this time. I could hear a faint rhythm beneath the windless stillness. Not footsteps, something lighter. A soft, intermittent tapping, like someone flicking their nail against bark. Once, twice, then silence. 5 seconds later, it repeated from deeper in the trees. I stepped backward instinctively, touching my radio again. Dispatch, I've located additional belongings. I may be closing in on the hiker. The radio crackled and then clicked sharply, as if a button had been pressed on the other end, but no voice followed. Dispatch, confirm, I said quietly. Nothing, just the soft, wet clicking of static that pulsed in short intervals. The tapping in the woods ceased abruptly. My heartbeat sharpened, pulsing in my ears in rhythm with the static. I took another step back and caught movement, this time directly ahead, just outside the ring of stones. A shape, human height, still, too still. Through the fog, I could see the vague outline of shoulders and a head, facing me. Not approaching, not retreating, watching. I called out, "Sir, is that you?" My voice hit the fog and seemed to vanish immediately. There was no echo, no shift from the figure. I took a cautious step forward. The shape dissolved, completely, like it had been made of the fog itself. A chill rippled through my spine, but I forced myself to hold steady. Visual distortions in dense fog are common. I'd seen it before. I repeated that in my head like a mantra. Focus on the facts. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. I skirted the stone circle, choosing not to step inside. It felt wrong somehow, though I couldn't justify the instinct, and followed the faint continuation of the path leading away from the plateau. The sock I bagged and logged as evidence. The tapping resumed behind me as I walked, once every few seconds. A rhythm without pattern, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, as if shifting locations. The forest wasn't silent anymore. It whispered. It breathed. My own breath sounded too loud in my ears. Then, about 200 yards past the plateau, I heard something that froze me mid-step. A voice. Soft. Male. Not far ahead. Over here. Just 2 words. Not a shout. Not desperate. Calm. Measured. Like someone who knew exactly where I was, and wanted me to know he knew. I raised my radio again with a shaking hand. Dispatch. I've got vocal contact. I didn't add the part gnawing at the back of my mind. The voice didn't sound frightened. It sounded like it was waiting. The voice drifted through the fog so naturally that, for a split second, I believed it had to be the missing hiker. The tone wasn't panicked or strained. It sounded composed, almost conversational, as if he were standing 10 yards ahead with his hands in his pockets, waiting for me to catch up. But the calmness unsettled me more than if he'd been screaming. People lost in the mountains don't speak like that. Not after a full night alone in heavy fog, leaving torn notes and abandoned boots behind them like breadcrumb warnings. I tightened my grip on the radio and stepped forward slowly. The fog opened in narrow pockets, revealing glimpses of the trail ahead, but nothing human-shaped. I called out, "Sir, this is Ranger Haverly. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. Do not move." No answer. Only the soft, wet settling sound of fog droplets falling from leaves. I walked another 10 feet, pausing after each step to listen. The voice didn't repeat, but something else did. A single, muted crack from somewhere to my right, almost like a twig breaking under slow, intentional pressure. I turned toward the sound, squinting into the haze. Nothing. "Sir, can you respond verbally?" I called again, louder this time. A beat passed. 2, 3. Then the same voice, but this time behind me. "Over here." I spun so fast my boots dug trenches in the soft soil. The fog billowed from my movement, shifting into swirling sheets. Nothing stood there. No shadow. No silhouette. The trees remained perfectly still, their branches dripping with the same heavy moisture as before. I scanned for footprints or disturbed leaves, anything that could explain how someone moved so quietly and so quickly in this terrain. There was nothing. My stomach tightened, and for the first time in years, a quiet shiver crawled its way up my back. I'd been stalked by black bears, charged by panicked deer, and tracked missing hikers through storms that turned trails into rivers. But this silence, this presence that felt just out of reach, felt different. Like the woods themselves were trying to rearrange my senses. I forced myself to inhale slowly and repeat the grounding steps we're trained to use in disorienting environments. Identify fixed landmarks. Listen for directional cues. Confirm footing. I recited each in my head. But the fog made every tree look identical, like copy and paste silhouettes. And the quiet robbed me of any sense of direction. Even the mild breeze I'd felt earlier had died completely. I checked my GPS again. Coordinates flickered wildly for a moment, then stabilized, showing I was farther north than possible for the distance I'd walked. A half-mile farther. That wasn't just an error. That was a malfunction. I tapped the device, but the numbers jumped again, skipping like a scratched CD. Then the radio crackled. "Haverly report," dispatch said. Their voice was faint, but there. "I've made vocal contact with a male individual," I said. "But he's moving, possibly circling me. Visibility is low." "Copy. We're patching another ranger to your location. Continue tracking but proceed with caution." Their voice cut off abruptly. Not through a clean transmission fade, but like someone pressed their finger against the speaker and smothered the sound. A heavy, muffled silence replaced it. I tapped the radio. "Dispatch? Repeat last." Nothing. Faint click came through just once, like someone testing the transmit button. I didn't like that. I kept moving uphill. The grade steepened sharply, and my boots sank into damp moss. The trees thinned gradually, allowing the fog to thin with them. I reached a ridgeline where wind usually swept clean, but today the fog held its ground as if pinned in place. It clung to the ridge with unnatural weight. That's where I found the third note. It wasn't pinned under a rock this time. It was tied to a branch with a shoelace. That detail hit me harder than I expected. Tying a note means the writer wanted to make sure it wasn't lost. It means they were still thinking clearly. The paper trembled in the windless air as I pulled it free. The handwriting was worse now. Lines uneven, strokes jittered. I heard someone walking behind me. I know it wasn't an animal. Whoever it is, they don't answer when I call back. They just move. They're matching my pace. I'm heading to the fire road, but I think I'm being led somewhere else instead. Below the writing, a shaky line was drawn. A rough sketch of a ridge that forked in two directions. One arrow pointed labeled Fire Road. The other arrow had no label at all. But the line that indicated his path didn't follow the one labeled for safety. It veered toward the unlabeled direction. A cold knot formed in my chest. If the hiker had been misled by the fog and his own panic, he could have drifted dangerously off-trail. And with how the terrain folded and dipped, someone could walk for hours thinking they were climbing, only to loop back in circles. I radioed again. Dispatch, I've located another note. Hiker appears to be disoriented and potentially circling unfamiliar ridges. I'm continuing in his direction. Static answered. Then, faintly, beneath the static, I heard something that made me freeze mid-step. A breath. Not mine. Not the wind. A slow, deliberate inhale. And then a whispered exhale brushing the edge of the frequency. I could almost swear it was forming the beginning of a word. I lowered the radio slowly. "Sir," I called into the fog. "If you can hear me, keep speaking. I need to know where you are." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere deeper in the ridge, farther than a human voice should carry clearly through thick fog, I heard him again. "Over here." Same tone, same calmness. But something was different now. The voice wasn't close anymore. It wasn't shifting position around me. It was guiding me somewhere deeper, somewhere the trail wasn't meant to go. And as I stepped forward, following the pull of the voice, the fog behind me closed in fully, like a door clicking shut. The fog folded behind me so seamlessly that, when I glanced back, the trail I just walked had vanished completely. Not faint, not obscured, gone. I told myself that was normal as fog gets in the Appalachians anyway. Temperature shifts can erase visual depth in seconds. But something about the way it sealed off the path felt intentional, like the moment I stepped forward, the trail behind me was no longer available as an option. I forced my attention ahead, tracking the faint outline of the ridge as best I could through the blur. The voice had come from deeper in the valley, a direction no hiker should willingly choose. The terrain there dropped off steeply, twisting into ravines that even locals avoided. But the missing hiker might not have known that, especially if he was disoriented. Still, the tone of his voice kept replaying in my head. Calm. Too calm. That wasn't the voice of someone who'd been lost overnight. Focus on the job, I muttered to myself. Locate the hiker. Get him out. I continued downhill, moving slowly to avoid slipping on the damp rocks hidden beneath the fallen leaves. The fog muffled everything except my heartbeat, which thumped louder the deeper I went. The forest grew darker, not because of shade, but because the fog thickened into a gray curtain. Even the thin, early morning light couldn't penetrate it. Another 100 yards in, I saw movement. Not a figure this time, but a faint flicker of something reflective near the base of a black oak. I approached cautiously. It was a phone, a cracked smartphone lying face down on the moss. When I turned it over, the screen lit up for half a second before dying completely. No power. The casing was scratched, as if it had skidded across rock. Next to it was another page from the notebook, this one wedged under a root. The edges were damp and curled, the ink bleeding slightly. It's staying just out of sight. I can hear it when I stop walking. Stops when I move. I think it wants me to follow it. I don't know why, but I'm starting to feel like I'm not supposed to turn around. I let out a slow breath. The hiker wasn't just lost, he was being psychologically cornered. Panic can warp perception faster than anything else out here. Echoes, fog, spatial distortion. People can convince themselves something is stalking them when they're really just hearing their own movements bouncing off the ridge walls. I knelt to examine the ground. There, finally, something concrete. A partial footprint. Boot tread. The same brand pattern I'd seen earlier on the abandoned hiking boot. It pointed downhill, following the faint depression of a barely visible game trail. I radioed dispatch again. I found the hiker's phone and additional notes. I'm moving into the lower valley. Visibility extremely poor. The radio hissed, then carried a clipped message. Copy. Ranger Lyons is en route from the North Access Road. ETA 40 minutes. That was reassuring. Lyons wasn't just a colleague. He was the kind of ranger who kept calm when everyone else started losing it. Knowing he was coming gave me more grounding than the radio towers ever did. I continued downhill. The grade steepened sharply, and I shifted my weight to keep balance. At one point, the trail narrowed to the width of my boot. To my left, the slope dropped into a bowl of fog that looked almost liquid. I couldn't see the bottom. Then another voice, not words this time, just a single low hum, faint, echoing the way sound does in narrow hollows. It rose and fell with no rhythm. I stood still, listening hard. It was too sustained to be an animal call, too tonal to be wind, and too steady, like someone exhaling through their throat, holding one long note. I turned slowly in a circle, trying to locate the direction. The hum didn't move. It stayed suspended in the air like a thread pulled tight. I felt the first hint of genuine unease. I kept moving. A few minutes later, the path widened again into a narrow shelf of rock. And there, lying directly in the center, was a backpack. Unzipped. Contents spilled in a clean semicircle. Not scattered by wildlife. Placed. Sorted. Items laid out in deliberate order. A water filter, 2 granola wrappers, a headlamp, a small first aid pouch, a folded bandana, and at the edge of the rock another note. I think it's behind me right now. I'm scared to turn around. I don't hear it moving anymore, and that scares me more than when it did. If anyone finds this, please tell my family I tried to stay calm. I exhaled shakily. This wasn't good. The hiker was deteriorating mentally, leaving clearer signs of distress in each note. I bagged the evidence and stepped past the sorted items, scanning for tracks. That's when I found something that stopped me cold. My own footprints, not old ones, fresh, crisp edges. My tread pattern, my stride length, leading toward the ridge, the same direction I was currently walking. But I hadn't been here before. I was certain of it. I crouched to examine them, heart thudding. The soil was soft, untouched by recent rain. These prints couldn't be older than a few minutes. And they were mine. I recognized the slight inward turn of my left foot. I stood slowly, glancing up the trail I was following. If my footprints were in front of me, that meant only one of two things. Either I had somehow looped around without realizing it, unlikely given the terrain, or someone else was wearing my exact boot tread. I didn't like either answer. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. Haverly location check, dispatch said. I may be off course. I'm tracking multiple signs, but the terrain is looping. Requesting GPS confirmation. Static. Then a warped version of dispatch's earlier words played back, like an echo that had been recorded and replayed incorrectly. Haverly, location check. Same inflection, same cadence, but wrong timing. I backed up a step. That's when a faint voice came from farther down the trail. A whisper this time, so soft I barely caught it. Don't turn around. Not angry, not panicked, not threatening, just advising, as if whoever said it genuinely believed turning around was the worst thing I could do. I froze, breath locked in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to identify the source, but my feet wouldn't move. My legs felt anchored, like the fog itself had weight. And somewhere behind me, somewhere very, very close, a twig snapped. The twig snapped so close behind me that instinct took over before reason could intervene. My shoulders tightened, breath catching in my throat, and every muscle in my legs braced for a turn. But something, maybe the warning in that whispered voice, kept me frozen. Not from fear, though fear was there, spreading cold and sharp across my chest. It felt more like my body understood a rule I hadn't yet learned. A boundary I wasn't meant to cross. I exhaled slowly and forced myself to speak, keeping my voice steady. If you're the missing hiker, I need you to answer me. I'm here to help. Just talk to me. Say anything. Silence. Not even the fog shifted. I listened hard, counting the seconds. 3, 6, 10. No footsteps followed. No movement. No breath besides my own. The forest had returned to its smothered stillness, as though whatever snapped that twig had already withdrawn deeper into the fog. When I finally gathered enough courage to move, I didn't turn around. I stepped forward, one slow step, then another. My pulse thudded in my ears as I forced my eyes to stay on the trail ahead. The fog thickened, the air cooling with each step until I could see my breath drifting upward in thin streams. That wasn't normal. The morning temperature shouldn't have dipped that sharply, not without wind or altitude change. But the valley seemed to be generating its own weather now, ignoring the rules I knew. 15 yards ahead, the trail dipped into a shallow ravine choked with mountain laurel. The leaves formed a tight canopy overhead, funneling me into a natural corridor. Every sound amplified in a way that made it impossible to tell distance. Tiny drops of condensation hitting leaves sounded like footsteps. Shifting bark sounded like breathing. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn. A jacket, hanging on a branch at eye level, zipped halfway, sleeves limp. The same color listed on the missing hiker's permit. I approached carefully, checking the ground first. No footprints. No scuff marks. The jacket hadn't been thrown or snagged. It had been hung neatly, placed with purpose. A loop of fabric hooked over a branch so lightly that a small breeze would have knocked it down. I touched the sleeve. Cold. Damp at the cuff, drier near the shoulder. Recently worn. Inside the chest pocket, I found another note. This one nearly illegible. I think it wants me alone. I think it waits until I stop. I can't turn around. It's closer every time I check. Please, I don't know what's following me. The handwriting slanted downward, trailing off at the end like his hand had slipped. I bagged the note and swallowed hard. Nothing about this pointed to a stable mental state. If he was hallucinating from exhaustion or dehydration, he could be in serious danger. The ravine deepened, the fog following me like water pouring down a drain. I moved slowly, scanning the ground, searching for any sign he'd passed through. The trail narrowed again, edging along the side of a sloped rock wall slick with moss. Then I saw it. A handprint, fresh, smeared along the moss as though someone had slipped and caught themselves. I touched it. The moss was depressed, still springing back. He was close. "Sir," I called louder this time. "This is Ranger Haverly. I'm here to help you. If you can hear me, respond." For a moment, nothing. Then I heard breathing. Soft, uneven, coming from somewhere down the ravine. "Hold your position," I shouted, heart pounding. "I'm moving toward you. Don't move." The breathing didn't change. It didn't retreat. It stayed steady, just loud enough for me to distinguish it from the fog-dampened air. I moved toward it, stepping carefully along the narrow ledge. The fog thinned slightly, offering a view into the hollow at the bottom. That's when the breathing stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Cut off as cleanly as if someone had pressed a hand over a mouth. I stopped too, listening harder. "Sir," I called. Silence. Then, from a different direction entirely, a rustle. Behind me, up the ravine. Not close, but not far either. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy enough to be human. I clenched my jaw, forcing my mind not to jump to conclusions. A second person? A local? Lions arriving early? Or even the missing hiker circling back? But the footsteps didn't match the terrain. They didn't slip on the loose rocks, didn't grind leaves, didn't shift weight the way real boots would. They moved in a steady rhythm, as if the ground shaped itself around them. I raised my radio. Dispatch requesting immediate confirmation on Ranger Lion's location. I may have multiple individuals in the search area. Static. Then the same single click, like someone pressing the transmit button without speaking. Cold spread across my scalp. I backed toward the ravine floor, lowering myself carefully. The last thing I needed was to twist an ankle in this terrain. Once I reached the bottom, visibility dropped again. The fog was thicker here, collecting in the hollow like breath trapped under a blanket. The smell changed too. Earthier. Damp soil with a hint of something metallic underneath. As I stepped forward, my boot bumped something soft. A glove. Not dropped, placed. Fingers curled slightly inward, resting atop a rock as though someone had set it down gently. Next to it was another note, pinned under a pebble. The writing shook so violently it nearly tore the paper. "If you're reading this, don't follow the voice. It gets clearer the farther you go. That's not where I am. It's where it wants you." My pulse spiked. I straightened slowly, scanning the fog. The footsteps behind me stopped. The forest froze. Then, from farther down the ravine, the direction the hiker warned me not to go. The voice drifted toward me again. But this time it used my name. Colton. Soft, measured, calm, and impossibly close. I'm not ashamed to admit it. My hands shook. No hiker should know my name. I hadn't introduced myself out loud except through radio calls. I raised my radio again. "Dispatch, emergency confirmation. Did you transmit my name on the line?" Static answered. Then a distorted echo of my own voice. The same tone, the same cadence. "Colton, not transmitted, not recorded, repeated, as if something had been listening, as if something was practicing." Hearing my own voice echo back at me, warped, delayed, but unmistakably mine, hit harder than anything I had encountered so far. The woods were silent except for that thin thread of distortion drifting through the static, like the mountain had caught my words and was trying them on for size. My pulse hammered against my throat, but I steadied the radio against my chest and forced my breathing slow. Real explanations exist for every auditory hallucination in wilderness conditions. Fog refracts sound. Ravines warp it. Stress sharpens it. I reminded myself of all of that. But none of those explanations should make the echo choose my name. I lowered the radio slightly and spoke into the fog with the kind of firmness I reserved for emergencies. "If someone is out here, you need to make yourself visible. Now." There was no reply, only the slow drip of condensation falling from the laurel leaves and the soft hiss of the fog as it crawled along the ravine floor. Then the breathing returned, but this time ahead of me. Not behind, not above, ahead, uneven, shallow, human. My chest tightened. "Sir," I called, stepping forward slowly. "Do not move. I'm coming to you." A crackle answered me, something shifting weight on damp soil. My beam of vision caught a darker shape through the fog, low to the ground. Small. I moved carefully, boots sinking into the soft earth with quiet thuds. When I got close enough, my heart sank. A torn backpack strap. Not the hiker. Left behind like the other items. I crouched, scanning the earth for footprints. There were depressions, small ones, leading up the slope. They weren't neat like the arranged belongings. These looked frantic, staggered, the earth torn by hurried steps. That was good. It meant the hiker was moving with purpose, possibly still alive. But another set of footprints trailed alongside them. Lighter steps, almost too light to impress the soil. I knelt and traced one with a gloved hand. Barefoot, narrow, the same shape I had seen earlier on the upper ridge. The same direction, following, at a patient pace. A shiver crawled up my spine, but I straightened and continued carefully up the slope. The fog seemed even thicker than before, as though it was clinging to me, pulling at my uniform with every step. My shoulders brushed against laurel branches that shifted silently in my wake. As I climbed higher, I realized the breathing had disappeared again. But something else took its place, a soft rhythmic tapping. Not woodpecker tapping, something more deliberate, spaced evenly, like someone tapping a stick against tree bark. Tap, 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 always 3 taps, always the same distance apart, never closer, never farther. I followed the tracks until the slope flattened into a narrow ridge. My GPS flickered again, resetting coordinates without warning. It showed I was nearly 2 miles north of the recorded ridgeline. Impossible. I hadn't walked that distance. I hadn't even had room to. I glanced around. That's when I saw the first sign of collapse. A torn piece of the hiking permit stuck to a branch at head height. Moisture had curled the edges, but the printed date and the signature were still visible. I took a slow breath and scanned the ground. Footprints, fresh, boot tread, leading deeper onto the ridge. And right beside them, those same barefoot tracks. I tightened my jaw. If the hiker was being followed by someone, I needed to establish visual contact immediately. Panic could push him into dangerous terrain. I radioed dispatch again. Dispatch, I have continuous sign of the hiker. Requesting updated coordinates for Ranger Lions. Only static. Then softly, beneath the static, another breath. Colton. Not a voice this time. A whisper. Low. Barely shaped into my name. Not replayed radio, this was external. Real air. Real distance. Someone close enough for sound to reach me without distortion. I spun toward the direction it came from, but the fog swallowed everything. My flashlight beam diffused into a pale glow. Identify yourself, I barked. Now! No answer, but the tapping resumed, now on my left. Tap, tap, tap. I steadied my breathing and kept moving, following the ridge's faint line. The ground here was uneven, dotted with exposed roots and jagged stones hidden beneath the leaf litter. My boot caught on something, a fallen branch, and I stumbled forward, catching myself against a tree trunk. My hand pressed against something soft. A shirt, pinned beneath my palm, half buried in leaves. I lifted it, damp, cold. A patch sewn into the collar read, M.J. Laren, Knoxville, Tennessee. The missing hiker. I had confirmation now this was his gear, but he would never abandon this much clothing willingly. Not unless exhaustion or hypothermia was setting in, or unless he was being chased by someone, something. I couldn't assume anything yet. I stood slowly and froze. At the base of a nearby oak, wedged beneath a root, lay the missing hiker's notebook, no longer torn apart. The remaining pages had been folded neatly into a tight square, bound with his shoelace, placed like an offering or a message. I retrieved it with care and untied the knot. When I unfolded the pages, I felt my breath catch. The first page held only one sentence. I can't tell if it's behind me or becoming me. I swallowed hard. The second page was blank. The third page blank. But the fourth, a crude drawing. A human figure drawn without feet, standing in fog, its arms too long, its head turned sharply to the side. I closed the notebook and stowed it quickly. The tapping stopped. Everything stopped. Then, from right beside me, so close the breath brushed my ear, a whisper. Over here. Not calm this time. Not coaxing. Not mocking. Exhausted. Strained. Almost pleading. I whipped my head toward the sound, heart slamming against my ribs. But there was nothing. Not even footprints. Just fog shifting, closing, circling. Then, farther down the ridge, deeper into the trees, I heard crashing. Heavy footfalls. A man running. Branches breaking. Breath ragged with panic. The missing hiker. Alive. I sprinted after the sound, pushing through the fog with everything in me. My boots hammered the earth. My radio bounced against my chest. My lungs burned with the cold air. Sir, stop. I'm coming to you. The crashing grew louder, then sharper, then cut off in an instant. A single sudden stop, like someone had grabbed him mid-stride. I slid down the ridge, mud splashing against my uniform as I shouted, "Sir, answer me." Silence. Then, a voice I didn't recognize. Too soft. Too close. "You shouldn't have followed." The voice? Low, unfamiliar, too calm for the situation. Hung in the air like cold breath. I froze mid-step, boots sinking slightly into the soft loam beneath me. My flashlight beam trembled across the fog, illuminating nothing but drifting white and the vague silhouettes of branches overhead. My pulse hammered so hard it felt like my ribs were vibrating around it. I swallowed. "Identify yourself," I said, forcing authority into my voice. "This is Ranger Haverly. If you're a civilian, you need to make yourself visible." No response. Not even the subtle shift of weight or the scrape of movement. Just fog settling deeper into the slope, as if the whole valley took a slow breath inward. "Sir," I tried again, louder this time. "If you're the missing hiker, say your name. Say anything." Silence. A drop of condensation hit a leaf near my shoulder and sounded like a gunshot in the dense quiet. I felt each second stretch, pulled thin by tension until it barely resembled time at all. I moved forward slowly, crouched slightly to keep my center of gravity low. The ground here had softened into mud, disturbed by frantic movement. Fresh tracks, deeper boot impressions, dragged leaves. The hiker had definitely come this way at speed, but the shape of the prints changed as they continued downhill. The steps grew shorter, closer together, then staggered. His stride had collapsed into something less coordinated. Someone running out of strength. I followed the trail another 10 yards until the boot prints simply stopped. Not faded, stopped. Right at the edge of a boulder the size of a truck tire. I scanned left, then right. No continuation. No sign of a slip. No scuff on the rock. No indication he climbed over it. It made no sense. People don't vanish mid-stride. Panic or not, exhaustion or not, a physical body always leaves a clue. Always. I stepped to the side and swept my light across the mud again, and nearly missed it. A partial handprint. Fingertips gouged into the mud, dragging horizontally toward the side of the boulder, as if someone had been pulled. My throat tightened. I circled the rock carefully, keeping one hand on its rough edge. On the other side, the ground dipped sharply, too steep for a normal fall but not impossible. My light swept the slope. Leaves. Fog. No body. But then, something pale caught the corner of my beam. Fabric. I slid down the slope on one knee and reached for it. A torn shirt sleeve. Same color as the hiker's base layer. The tear was clean on one side, jagged on the other, as if caught and ripped by sudden weight. A few feet farther downhill, another note. This one wasn't placed with care. It was crumpled, smeared with dirt, edges softened by moisture. I unfolded it carefully. If it catches you, don't look at its feet. Don't look back. Don't ever look back. The graphite was nearly pressed through the paper, written in frantic strokes. My breath fogged the air as I read it again. Feet? What would he have seen to make him write that? My radio crackled suddenly, making me jolt. "Haverly report," dispatch said, but the voice was faint, warped, like it was echoing through a long metallic tunnel. "Dispatch, I have material evidence and signs of physical distress. I believe the hiker may have been injured or..." I hesitated. "Maybe with another individual." Static swallowed my next word, then released it in a distorted echo a second later, like the radio was lagging behind time. "Individual." I clenched my jaw. "Requesting exact coordinates for Ranger Lyons. I need backup on the lower ridge immediately." Another burst of static. Then, "Haver. Ridge, trying to ping. Lyons is... miles. Signal obstructed." The line collapsed into noise. I straightened, scanning the fog again, letting the mountain settle back into stillness before moving. My breath felt too loud in the quiet, like each exhale drew attention. Something shifted uphill. A single footstep. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I pointed my flashlight upward, but the beam bounced off the fog uselessly. Another step. Closer. Then a third. I didn't wait to see more. I backed down the slope, using the trees for balance. Whatever was up there, I couldn't let it trap me against the boulder. "Sir," I called into the fog again. "If you're injured, keep making noise. I'm coming to you." But the only noise was the light, rhythmic tapping I had heard before. 3 taps, then silence. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the same direction as the footsteps. I kept moving downhill, heart straining against my sternum. Then the voice returned. Not a whisper this time, not a call, a murmur, soft, broken, pleading. "Help me." The words drifted from below, deeper into the hollow. My chest tightened. It sounded like the hiker. The fear, the desperation, it matched the notes. I angled my light downhill and saw a faint indentation in the leaves, like a body had rolled through. I followed it. The slope dipped into a narrow ravine, shadows clinging to its sides even in the fog. A sound echoed between the walls, breathing, harsh and fast, mixed with soft whimpers. "Sir, I hear you," I said urgently. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." The breathing hitched, shifted. A small sob broke through the fog. "Please, don't let it." His voice cut off abruptly. Then the ravine went dead silent. The kind of silent that feels like pressure in the air. I reached the bottom and swept my flashlight across the ground. Mud, leaves, a snapped branch. No hiker, but their drag marks, faint but present. Something had been pulled across the floor of the ravine toward a narrow gap in the laurel thicket. I crouched, studying the gap. Too tight for a comfortable crawl, too low for someone to run through. But not impossible. Not for someone desperate. The drag marks continued inside. I took a slow breath, steeling myself. And then, a hand shot out from inside the gap. Thin, mud-covered, trembling. The fingers curled weakly toward me. A voice rasped from the darkness behind it. "Ranger, please." Relief crashed over me so hard my knees almost buckled. He was alive. Injured, but alive. I crawled forward, reaching out. "I've got you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm right here." But as soon as my fingers brushed his, something behind him moved. Not a shape, not a figure, just a shift in the fog. A displacement, presence. The hand jerked suddenly, yanked backward with violent force. The hiker screamed once, hoarse, raw, and vanished into the darkness of the thicket. The scream cut off. The drag marks deepened. The fog swallowed everything. And the last thing I heard before the silence closed again was my own voice whispering from inside the gap. "Don't follow." For a moment after the hiker's scream vanished into the thicket, I couldn't move. My body refused to respond, suspended between instinct and disbelief. The fog curled back around the narrow gap in the laurel like a living curtain, closing off the last place I'd seen him. My hand still hovered where his fingers had been, phantom pressure lingering against my glove. "Sir," I shouted, but the word broke against the tight walls of the ravine and dissolved into a dull echo. I crawled closer to the gap, my breath clouding the air. "If you can hear me, answer." Silence. Too complete. Too instantaneous. A predator would have made noise dragging him deeper. Brush snapping, soil shifting. But the moment he disappeared, everything went still, as if the woods were holding their breath. I forced a slow inhale, grounding myself. There were logical explanations. A cave opening. A drop-off. A concealed passage between rocks. Panicked humans can disappear into tiny spaces animals could barely fit through. My job wasn't to understand the fear, that was his. My job was to track him. I clicked my radio. "Dispatch, Haverly. I've located the subject. He's injured and has moved into a confined space. Requesting immediate assistance at coordinates." Static. A long stretch of it. Thick, rolling like underwater thunder. Then, not dispatch, but a faint breath entered the channel, followed by a trembling whisper. "Colton." My name again. I clenched my jaw. "Dispatch, confirm. Do not repeat my name. I need Lyons ETA." Silence. Then the same whisper repeated, this time shaped more closely to my own cadence. "Colton, don't follow." A chill rippled across my scalp. I lowered the radio slowly, not trusting my voice enough to respond. I needed a clear mind, not a spiraling one. I crawled closer to the gap and shone my flashlight inside. The beam hit the walls of a narrow passage. Roots hanging down like ribs, soil packed tight. No room to stand. Barely room to crawl. But the drag marks led straight into it. Streaked lines of disturbed earth pulling deeper into the dark. "Sir?" I called, trying to angle the light as far as possible. "If you can hear me, knock twice." Only the soft hiss of fog moving across the entrance answered. I pressed my shoulder against one side of the thicket, testing the stability. The earth felt loose, crumbly. Entering could collapse it on top of me. But leaving him inside, injured, terrified, potentially unconscious, was out of the question. I dropped onto my elbows and began to edge inside. The moment my head crossed the threshold, the temperature plummeted. It was like dipping into a pocket carved out of winter air. So abrupt it made my teeth clench. I exhaled gently, watching the fog of my breath drifting forward. The passage narrowed further, forcing my shoulders inward. Roots brushed the sides of my helmet. Soil pressed inches from my face. Everything smelled of damp decay. I pushed deeper. 5 feet in, the drag marks continued, but now they looked different. Smoother, less frantic. More like something had pulled him with steady, continuous force. "Sir," I called again, voice muffled by the tight space. "Keep talking to me. I'm coming." Then, Distantly, far ahead, a sob. I froze, every muscle locked. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. "Make any sound. Anything." Another sob. Softer, like someone holding back tears. I started crawling again, faster now. Dirt pressed into my gloves. My backpack scraped against the ceiling. The passage grew tighter. Too tight. My breath hitched as claustrophobia crept up the back of my throat. I swallowed hard and kept moving. Then the sobbing stopped, and a different sound rose to replace it. Breathing, but not the hikers. Slow, deep, deliberate. Came from just ahead of me, maybe 10 feet. I halted instantly. "Who's there?" I called. The breathing didn't pause, didn't speed up, didn't change at all. Just continued steadily, as if the lungs producing it were enormous and patient. I angled my flashlight forward, but the beam died after 6 feet, swallowed by the darkness of the narrow passage. "Sir," I tried again. The breathing continued. Then, a handprint appeared in the dirt ahead of me, fresh, pressed into the soil in real time like fingertips carving downward. But there was no hand, no arm, just the impression forming, slow and deliberate, dragging inward. My lungs tightened. The rational parts of my mind scrambled for explanations. Soil shifting, roots collapsing. But nothing accounted for the controlled movement I'd just seen. I began to back out of the passage. Carefully, steadily, keeping my eyes forward. But the breathing ahead of me grew louder, deeper, like whatever was there was expanding, filling the narrow corridor with its presence. I forced myself to stay calm, whispering through clenched teeth, "Not supernatural, not supernatural." Fog acoustics, panic, echoes. My left boot slipped on a patch of loose soil. I caught myself on an exposed root, pulling my body backward inch by inch. Behind me, near the entrance, I heard something else. Another voice. Weak, human. The hikers. "Please, don't leave me." I froze. The voice came from outside the passage. Behind me, not ahead. But the drag marks, everything I followed, led inside. "Sir," my voice cracked. "Where are you?" His voice trembled, closer now. Not in there." My blood turned to ice. I twisted my neck slightly, trying to look back. But there was no angle. The tunnel was far too narrow. I could only listen. "Haverly," he whispered, raw with fear. Get out now." As I scrambled backward, the breathing ahead of me changed, shifting from steady rhythm into something else. Movement, fast scraping, a rush of displaced air, soil cascading. I accelerated my crawl, shoulders scraping painfully against packed earth, boots digging for traction. Behind me, the hiker's voice rose in panic. "Hurry!" I didn't need to be told twice. The passage behind me brightened, fog from the outside drifting inward, and just as my hands reached the entrance, something slammed against the earth behind me. Hard. A shock wave of impact rattled dirt from the ceiling and sent it showering across my back. Roots snapped. Soil collapsed. I pulled myself the final foot and tumbled out of the passage, rolling onto the ravine floor. My breath hitched, chest heaving. The thicket behind me convulsed once, as though something huge had struck it from inside. Then it fell still. The fog closed over it like nothing had happened. My radio crackled suddenly. "Haverly, repeat. Status. Dispatch finally clear. Normal. Grounded." I stared at the thicket, panting. Mud streaked across my arms and uniform. Before I could answer, the hiker's voice, weak, trembling, rose from somewhere deeper in the ravine behind me. "Ranger, please. I'm over here." The sound of the hiker's voice, thin, hoarse, desperate, froze me where I stood. I turned slowly toward the direction it came from, the ravine stretching ahead in a narrow corridor of twisted laurel and drifting fog. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the voice had a raw authenticity I recognized immediately. The terror in it was real, human. "Sir," I called, breath trembling. "Keep talking. I'm coming to you." But he didn't answer. The ravine swallowed the silence like water closing over a stone. I started moving again, stepping carefully across the uneven ground. My muscles still twitched from adrenaline, dirt flaking off my uniform from the crawl space. Every 20 feet I stopped to listen. Each time, I thought I heard the faint echo of a breath or a whisper, but nothing I could reliably trace. Fog thickened ahead, pooling low in the hollow like it had weight. My boots sank into soft mud as I followed a faint depression in the ground. A drag mark, or maybe just runoff from the night's moisture. I scanned for footprints but saw none. "Sir," I called again. "If you're injured, I need you to make any sound you can." For a moment, nothing. Then, a weak cough. Ahead, left of center. Close. I rushed toward it, parting branches with my forearm, pushing through the fog. My breath came fast, sharp. The trail dipped suddenly and I slid down a short incline, boots digging into the soil. At the bottom was a small clearing, barely 10 feet across, ringed by laurel so dense it looked woven. In the center of the clearing was the missing hiker, or rather what was left of him as a coherent person. He sat slumped against a fallen log, legs splayed awkwardly, one shoe missing, the other barely hanging on. His shirt was torn, smeared with mud, his hands shaking violently. His face was pale, streaked with dirt, eyes wide with a hollow kind of fear that didn't seem entirely aware of where he was. I rushed forward and knelt beside him. "Sir, I'm Ranger Haverly. You're safe now. I've got you." I kept my tone steady, soothing, the way we're trained for trauma victims. "You're going to be okay." His lips trembled. His eyes slowly shifted toward me with visible effort. "Don't," he rasped. "Turn around." My spine stiffened. "I'm not turning around," I said gently. "You're safe. It's just us here. Can you tell me if you're hurt?" His breathing hitched, frail and uneven. "You kept following," he whispered. "I told you not to." I swallowed hard. "I know, but you're safe now. I'm gonna call for evacuation." I reached for my radio and froze. The hiker's gaze wasn't on me. Not quite. It was on something over my shoulder. A tremor passed through him. His fingers twitched upward, shaking violently as he pointed behind me. My chest tightened painfully. "Sir," I said softly, "there's nothing behind me. You're disoriented. You've been through hell. You're seeing shapes in the fog." He shook his head. Tears welled in his eyes. "It followed you too." A chill rippled up my spine. I didn't turn. Every instinct screamed not to. Not because I believed something was there, but because he believed it so completely that looking might worsen his condition, might reinforce whatever trauma-induced hallucination he was trapped in. Instead, I spoke calmly, keeping my voice even. "We're leaving," I said. "Right now. Lions should be close. I'm going to get you out." I helped lift him slowly. His weight sagged heavily against me, but he pushed himself upright. His breath wheezed through clenched teeth. Step by step, we moved toward the edge of the clearing. Then, a branch snapped, directly behind us. The hiker flinched so violently he nearly collapsed again. "Don't turn around," he cried, voice cracking. "I'm not," I said firmly. Another snap, closer, and then footsteps, slow, measured, heavy, human, or what sounded human. They moved in an arc around the clearing, staying just within the wall of fog, never close enough for me to see. I tightened my grip on the hiker's arm, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "Dispatch," I said into the radio, voice low but steady. "I have located the subject. He is alive, severely disoriented, and we have an unknown individual in proximity. Request immediate backup and possible medevac." A breath of static answered. Then Dispatch's voice broke through, clear this time. "Haverly, Lyons is 5 minutes from your coordinates. Hold position. Repeat, hold position. 5 minutes. We just had to wait 5 minutes." The footsteps stopped. Silence closed over the clearing again, heavy, expectant. The hiker pressed closer to me, trembling so hard I could feel it through both our layers of clothing. Then, from the fog behind us, a voice spoke, a perfect imitation of my own. "Colton, don't turn around." My breath caught, not because I believed it was something impossible, but because the hiker believed it wasn't me. His legs gave out completely, and I had to catch him around the chest. He sobbed openly now, whispering, "Make it stop, please." I tightened my grip and spoke loudly, clearly, for whoever was out there. "I'm with the National Park Service. Identify yourself. Now." Silence. Then, footsteps retreating. Not fast, not panicked, just leaving. A few seconds later, branches snapped farther away, then even farther, until the sound faded into the fog entirely. I exhaled shakily. My body felt like it had been vibrating for hours. Lyons arrived exactly 5 minutes later, his voice calling out through the fog, his flashlight beam cutting through the haze like a lifeline. When he reached us, his expression changed instantly at the sight of the hiker. Together we secured him, wrapped him in an emergency blanket, and began the slow extraction up the ravine. The hiker never stopped trembling, never looked behind us, never unclenched his jaw. He didn't speak again until we reached the fire road. And even then, his words came out as a whisper so faint I almost missed it. "It wasn't a person," he said. "It was something that learned us." Strictly realistic? Yes, because trauma does that. Panic does that. Isolation does that. But I'll tell you this, as we hiked out down the fire road and the fog finally lifted, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mountain had grown quiet again. Not relieved, just waiting.